I think it's agreed that the dance of death unites us all. Regardless of how unique you are, there is nothing individual about dying. It's the one thing that the whole human race and every other species on the planet has in common. Though the state of being dead is just one thing, our ideas and emotions towards dying and death branch so much further. They are theories that have indented themselves into our culture, and that to me is art.
Well, it's kind of like a ground in my mind that I'm never really okay to step on. The death to me is just like nothingness.
Death to me is when someone dies, and it's a sad time for family, relatives, obviously. It's when someone's life ends, and I believe that after that they have a new life.
To me, I am not a religious person. I wasn't christened. I'm not baptized. I'm not, as I say, I'm not religious. But I do like to believe there is something after we die. I don't believe that we simply die and that's it. Your body rots and your soul is gone. I believe that yes, your body will rot and you will be gone, but I believe that your soul goes on somewhere. Where that somewhere is, I don't know.
The end of life. The stop.
It's the end of things, I suppose. In a literal sense, it's obviously, I think of it in terms of the end of life, but I mean, as a concept, I think, when I hear the word, I think of it more conceptually as the end of something.
It doesn't really mean anything. Like, you die and you go to heaven or hell, that's it.
Well, death has taken on a very new meaning for me over the last few years as I've encountered death in people really close to me or near death to people really close to me. So death to me in those contexts is a really painful experience.
I did read somewhere actually a while ago that, I can't remember who said it, somebody very famous, that philosophy, the project of philosophy was getting ready to die. And I think there's something to that, isn't there? That especially when you get older, you do think about one's inevitable demise.
When I was younger, I believed that there was a heaven and a hell, and like bad people that did bad things would go to hell, and obviously good people that did good things would go to heaven, and I still believe that now.
I don't think I ever really thought about death when I was young. I know that lots of teenagers do, but I never had that kind of goth outlook. I never dwelt on death. Maybe it's because I read a lot of comics, and in comics, people always come back. Characters die and then they come back. So I don't think I ever thought that was true, but it wasn't something that I thought about as final.
Well, basically, people will say that death is a happy place, but now I'm older, I did death a lot, and it might be for some people, but then when you think of the concept of heaven and hell, and when you think of hell, then I don't think so. It's a good place anymore.
I was raised a Catholic, and I went to Catholic primary school, and I was a practicing Catholic right up into adulthood, until I was about in my early 30s, when I was at university. So I think when I was younger, I very much took for granted the ideas of an afterlife, and the ideas of an immortal soul, and that kind of religious, metaphysical idea of life and of death.
So I went to a C of E school, Church of England school, and I was always told that when you die, your soul, your personality, etc., goes to heaven, or if you're a bad person, hell. So I think when I was younger, I looked at it far more in a religious way, and we went to heaven. And certainly when relatives died, you said, oh, they're looking at us from heaven.
Oh, well, I think when I was younger, I had quite a romantic notion of death. I don't know if that's common. And I was quite dramatic and, you know, wanting to be an actress and play all the big major sort of tragic roles, and convinced myself that I would die young, which didn't happen. I'm quite pleased to say. So I think it was quite a, yeah, as I said, romantic kind of notion of death, if that's possible, and not really a very realistic one.
Well, when I was younger, I got really panicky a lot of the time. Like, now something that I would call a panic attack, then I didn't really have a name for it. I would just get really panicky and fidgety, and I'd just walk backwards and forwards in my living room, not really knowing what to do about it. I think it's just because it's a whole thought of the unknown. Not knowing what is going to happen, but knowing that something is going to happen.
I think it's because it was when I was at university, and I was reading a lot and studying a lot, and I was my interests were broadening quite a bit. So I was looking at a lot more at philosophy and history and ancient history and different belief systems, and because I was studying literature, and all of those things kind of feed into literature across time. So, and I think I started to question things a bit more, and but then it just went. Like, the faith just went, and it is a bit strange. Like, it was just gone, and that's it. I can't have it back now, which is sad.
Probably in my 40s, actually. I honestly, apart from when I was in my 30s, I had some pretty serious bout of depression, and I did think about death then, actually. I was quite preoccupied with my own death, and I used to kind of daydream about who would be at my funeral and what the weather would be like and all that kind of thing. But that was a pretty dark period for me. But apart from that, those few months, it's not something that's really figured in my consciousness long until recently, as I've got older. And also, having a child makes you think about death more, because you imagine how that child will feel when you die yourself as a parent.
Well, I don't think I thought about death for a very long time until I did actually see someone die when I was very young. So when I was about 19 and actually witnessing someone on their deathbed, in their own bedroom, dying, and what that looked and sounded and felt like. And I don't think anything can prepare you for that, and you might have read about it or you might have seen something similar, but to actually witness it in real life, it is an image that obviously was very powerful for me, because I've never ever forgotten it. That, not so much just the image, but the sound as well. The sound that a person makes when they're dying.
Probably so my first proper experience with death was when my granddad died, and I was about 14 at the time. And I think that's probably when it changed, because I'd actually gone through that and gone, wow, that's someone that I love from my life that's gone. And that's probably when I looked at it in more detail and sort of said, they're gone, where have they gone? Does that make sense? Yeah. Really recently, I've had, in the last 2 years, I've had 2 grandparents and an uncle die. And when you're younger, you expect, I'm 23, as I'm growing up, I'm expecting my grandparents to die soon because they're 70, 80-year-old. But it's then when you see your own parents suffering, you think, God, that's going to be me soon, that's going to be my parents. So I think only in the last couple of years I've gone, I see everything my parents have had to go through planning their parents, my grandparents' funerals, and I think, I'm going to have to go and do that. I'm going to have to do exactly that with them, and that's when I've really realised it. So the last 2 years, probably.
I honestly think I was so, my mind was so bound up with films and books and comics and TV programs and drawing. I was into doing things, I think, and watching things and reading things, and death didn't really seem like a subject. It didn't seem like a subject that one could kind of think about separately from anything else in life.
A few years ago, I guess, I started understanding that obviously when people get old, they die, like over the age of, say, 70, 80. That's like the average age of a person when they die, to me.
Yeah, again, the religious upbringing, you've got to, going to Mass every Sunday, and death is a big bit of that, and death and resurrection, and that, so I think it was always there, the idea of death and life, from within the Christian belief system, life as being something that we do, like a relatively brief thing before the eternity of death and the afterlife. And I think that was so much a part of my understanding of the world that I think it was always there.
Also, basically, you have to wait till Judgment Day, and that's when God decides when you're going to go to heaven or hell. And heaven is like an eternal place, happiness, whatever. And people think that hell is like fire or whatnot, but I don't really know what it is, and I can't say what it is because obviously I'm not dead.
I believe you go somewhere and all your ailments and all your illnesses go, and you return to that point in your life where you are your most healthy. So, for example, my grandpa who passed away recently, I believe that when he died, his spirit went on and he's living somewhere where he didn't have heart problems, he didn't have cancer, he didn't have arthritis, he was young, he was able to go fishing all the time and do the things he wanted to do. So that's what I believe. I couldn't specifically pinpoint a place because I don't know, but that's what I think happens.
I believe the whole thing about how, like, scientifically, energy can't be destroyed. It just turns from one form into another. Mm-hmm. And because there's like energy within our bodies, I feel like when we die, we don't just completely stop existing. The energy that was within us transfers into a different type of energy. So when people die, their energy is still in the universe somewhere.
Well, I believe that when you die, your soul comes out of your body, so your body is left in the world, and your soul goes up and it either then goes to heaven or hell.
Well, I have two notions of what happens when you die. I have one rather easier to live with notion. When you lose someone, or when I lost someone recently, you don't want to think that there is no more existence, that they don't exist anymore. And so I found it really comforting to think that that person is still there in some form, sort of everywhere. And I do think of her as being everywhere in everything. I see a bird and I think, there you are, or the sun's rays will shine through and I'll feel them on my skin and I'll think, that's you, there you are. And that's a really powerful and comforting thought. But then there's the rational side of me that thinks that probably there is nothing.
I think when the brain stops functioning, consciousness ends, and that's it. That's the end, I think. And as I said earlier on, I do think there is a sense that a person lives on after they are dead in the minds of the people who knew them and the people who remember them, and obviously there are generations of dead who we still know of and we still speak about.
I think you just switch off. I just think you simply cease to exist. I think we're organisms like other organisms, and there's nothing after we die at all. Not even, we just cease to, we're just nothing.
Absolutely. I wish I still had faith. I wish I still believed in those things. It was better. Life was better then. I think. I always think that's a funny thing. People who've never been religious imagine that that it must be terrible having religious belief, because there's all this guilt, and you go through your whole life feeling like you're being judged, and it's terrible. It never was that for me. It was lovely, and things were. It's better. Things were better then, and then it went, and it was, like I said, I was sad.
Well, I like my belief because I can help myself to believe that if I'm a good person and I do good things, I will go to heaven, and that also stops me doing bad things, which will, I believe, lead me to hell.
I kind of wish I was a bit more at peace with the whole idea of death, because it still makes me feel uncomfortable, and it's only recently that I got over a massive existential crisis where I'd constantly have panic attacks about it, and just the thought of it freaked me out so much, just the thought of not knowing.
When I was younger, I did believe, not that we were a religious family or spent much time in churches, but I would sometimes go to church and I would hear Christian teachings and that kind of thing, and I would pray, and and that was totally of my own volition. I mean, nobody was indoctrinating me to do that. But as a child and as a teenager, I did used to pray, and I did believe in heaven, but I don't anymore. I can't. I know some people take comfort and find ways of justifying and explaining that in terms of their religion, but I can't. I can't see good people suffering and believe that there's a greater, good looking after them, because they're not looking after them.
I wish I had a religious outlook on life. I think it'd be lovely to believe all that. The thing is, if you believe in the afterlife, whether it's in a religious context or a spiritualist context or any kind of context, regardless of whether it's true or not, it means your life is happier when you're alive, because you believe that it's going to go on afterwards. But I don't believe that at all. I think that the cats and dogs have got it right, because they don't know they're going to die. So they're privileged to live their life without the knowledge of it coming to an end. That's why they don't need culture, I think.
Yeah, I wish I had something that said, don't worry, when you die, that's not just it. You go on and you come back as a dog or a cat or a lizard or a shark or whatever. I wish there was something whereby that we knew. I do wish we knew.
A lot of people, even though they don't vocalise it, are afraid. They're afraid to talk about it because, well, it is quite a scary thing, I suppose, thinking about the fact that one day you're just not going to exist anymore. So I think a lot of people try to kind of pussyfoot around it and avoid talking about it, but I think it's something that should be spoken about.
I do think that we don't talk enough about it. I do think that's true. And I think we don't talk enough about what the right approach to death is. And I think that's the problem. So I think, obviously, how one feels about the right approach to death is going to vary depending on one's beliefs about what happens after death. But nevertheless, I do think that there are good attitudes to have towards death and bad attitudes to have towards death.
Well, obviously most people don't feel comfortable talking about death because they may have had relatives or friends or grandparents that have died in the past, and they obviously feel upset about that. They don't want to talk about it. I feel like it should be something that people can talk about comfortably, because it's just something that happens in life.
We don't know. We don't. And I know my husband said to me just very recently, he's going into hospital in a few days. He's going into hospital, and he said we need to sort out a will. And of course you say, oh gosh, no, don't be silly. We can't possibly. We mustn't think like that. But in some ways, I'm grateful to him for putting that in place, because I know it can be a terrible thing for families if you haven't sorted that kind of thing out. But no, we don't want to think about it, do we? Well, I don't want to think about it.
I think we should probably have a bit more of an open attitude towards. I like the idea of the Day of the Dead and that kind of thing. You know, the celebration of the idea of life ending. I think it's, you know, much healthier to get it out and have a look at it. And this is why I don't like these euphemistic phrases and words like passed away. I mean, I know it's so common, the phrase passed away, that it's almost not euphemistic anymore, but I just think died is fine, you know, passed, moved, you know, all that stuff. I don't like it.
One of the things I think that we do have to be careful of is some of the language we use around death, especially around young people. Some of the terminology, you know, they've gone to sleep now, they're at peace now. Some of those phrases, I don't know that they're that helpful.
I think it depends on how old you are. Because obviously, if you're talking to like a 3-year-old about death, you wouldn't say all the bad stuff about it, because obviously it's going to be scary for them. But there's someone who's mature, sometimes, because some people get very emotional about the topic of death. But some people don't talk about it because they're scared of it. But I don't think there's anything to be scared of, because we're all going to die one day.
I don't think we should dwell on it, because if we lived every day thinking, oh, I'm going to die, that would take you one way or the other. You'd go, oh, well, I'm going to die, so it doesn't matter. Or you go, well, I've only got one life, so absolutely live it to the full. So I think in that respect, you should think about it, and children should be taught about it, but not too much. You shouldn't dwell on the depressing side of things. We don't know what happens, and we don't like to talk about things we don't fully know about.
Yes and no. I'm not scared of being dead, because, as I've said, I think I will have no awareness of being dead, and so being dead is not something that concerns me. I'm scared of dying too soon, though, in the sense that I feel I haven't done anything with my life yet, and it would be good to do some more with it before that happened. So, you know, in that sense, I'm terrified of death.
I was scared of dying, but now I feel like I'm not really scared of dying anymore, because, like I said, it's just something that happened. You can't really stop anything. Like, you can't stop it from happening, so, yeah.
I try to look it square in the face as a fact, and not be silly about it. I don't want to die. I'm frightened of it. But when it comes down to it, yeah, it's something that one has to accept, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. The fact that everything that I have done in life just suddenly, boom, like that is gone. Everything I've worked, all my training that I did, all the money that I've earned, all the relationships I've built, I'm scared that that's just gone, and that's it. That is a really, really scary thought, yeah.
I think so. I think there'll come a time when I will try and think about it. Although I'm not a religious person, I think that I am, perhaps some people would describe spiritual, and I do meditate and things, you know, I do spend time thinking about things on a different level, but I haven't given that much thought, and I sort of hope that one day I will sit down and really give that some thought and be less scared and be more prepared.
Well, I feel differently now, actually, and I don't want to get too miserable, but when I was a bit younger and I thought about death, my main concern about being dead was that I would miss out. I wouldn't know what happens next. I would miss out on all the things that happened after I was dead, and I wouldn't know the rest of the story. But, and again, I don't want to be too depressing, but the way things that are going environmentally, I sort of think I won't mind being dead, because I think what's to come is really, really frightening, and I'll be happy not to be around to see it.
I think I am, but I'm just scared of the whole, like I said, like all the nothingness, just scared of not existing. I'm not scared to talk about it. Death is inevitable, so I think it's something that should be spoken about in some form.
No.
I tend to think about death only when I will do bad things. I do bad things and I'm like, wait, I shouldn't be doing this. If I do this, I could go to hell. And that's pretty much the only times I think about death. I don't like thinking about death particularly, but it just comes into thought.
No, more than ever I think about it. And I'm trying to come to terms with the fact that my life's going to end. I'm at that odd age where I've had more life. There's more life behind me than there is in front of me. And I think that's a really significant thought. So I have to try to make the most of the life that I've got left.
I don't think about it often, but there are things that make me think about it. I tell you, I always think about it on planes. Always, always, always. And I don't fly very often, but I've flown twice this year. I went to New York in half term, and I went to Rome over Easter. And every single time I fly, I think I'm going to die, and you know, or it's possible. I think I am closer to death right now as the plane is taking off or landing. I'm all right in the air for the duration of the flight, but the taking off and the landing, I think that bit I am closer to death than most of the other times, and inevitably that makes me think about all those things I was just talking about. So the idea that what if I do die at this? I could die now, and what would that mean?
Basically, I have this thing, and they're called deep-in sessions, where I just sit and I think. But sometimes I don't think about death. The idea just pops up to me. Like, I might be thinking about life, and then it'll end up in death. But yeah, I don't really feel sad. I don't feel happy.
I had a really horrible experience about a year and a half, 2 years ago, whereby I found my nan passed away, and went into her flat and found her completely and utterly unexpected. She had health problems, but nothing, you know, she wasn't in stage 3 of cancer or anything like that. And I was the one that found her passed away, and I had to try and, on the phone to the ambulance, bring her back, etc. And so that was hard, and that definitely made me think more about it.
Sometimes I make myself think about the possibility of that eventuality. You know, there are some awful diseases, and you know, well, things happen to people, don't they, unexpectedly, and they die. So sometimes I force myself to think about that. It's really painful.
I think it depends on your emotional stability. Now, there's a Christian song that says, "No guilt in life, no fear in death. This is the power of Christ in me." So if someone dies, obviously you shouldn't mourn, because they might be going to stay with God forever. But some people, yeah, they can celebrate death, and some people can mourn death. I just think, don't mourn too much, because that affects you as well, and what you think, and blah.
About a week and a half ago, my uncle died, and for I wasn't close to my uncle, really. He lived in Devon, and I haven't seen him for about 20 years. So it's not that it didn't affect me particularly, but obviously it did affect my mum. And my uncle's wife, is not having a funeral at all. They're not doing anything, because that's what she said that he wanted. He wanted it just to be done, and that was it. And that's very difficult for my mum to not have that chance to not so much to mourn, but to celebrate the life, to remember, to sort of spend time with people that knew him, and to talk about them. And certainly at my dad's funeral just under a year ago, that was a really powerful thing for all of us. So it's both, really. It's both. I mean, we mourn, we must mourn, but I think we should also celebrate, because ultimately those things are for the living, rather than for the dead.
I think we should mourn because it's a person that's died and you knew them and they're not in the world anymore, so obviously you're going to miss them. So I think it should be a time of mourning, obviously not like for a really, really long time, like months or, you know, years, but obviously we should spend some time mourning that person, remembering them, and yeah.
Celebrating someone's life, although once someone has passed, it's really like, obviously it's like really sad, like a sad situation, but if you think about it, would you think that that person, once they'd passed, would want everyone to be sad?
I think someone who dies, like myself, if I die, when I die, I wouldn't want to think that people were mourning and, you know, wailing or sad. I would want them to be happy and hope that, you know, I left some happy memories with them. So celebrating, I think, is the way to go. I'm not sure that our society is very good at that. We have other traditions. We have the wake, and, you know, we do mourn. And I think I don't know if you have to go through a period of mourning or not.
Celebrate their life. Yeah, celebrate their life and what was good about it. My wife's father died late last year, and I had an odd thought at the wake, when, you know, there was nice food and chatting and there were smiles and sadness as well. And I thought, oh, this is a really good party, but there's someone missing from it. And of course, the person that wasn't there who would have really enjoyed it was the reason that the party was happening.
Well, when my granddad passed away, we had just like a normal funeral. We went to a church and everything, had like a ceremony and everything. And I guess it's what you could call it, just the average British kind of way to deal with it. But I don't know, I suppose because that was the only funeral that I've been to. But I never really know how to deal with it. It's kind of like, before, because I knew that he wasn't well and everything, I was kind of scared about it. But then after he did pass, it was like really strange, because I knew that he wasn't there and that he was never going to come back. But it didn't feel as different as I thought it would.
I've been lucky that it's not something I've had to deal with very much in my life. So until my dad died, nobody really who I was actually close to died. So all of my grandparents have died, but I never had a close relationship with them. Even with my dad, it was a bit odd because his illness was degenerative and it was cognitive. So him kind of the person inside had kind of died before the actual the death of the body, if you like. We'd got to a point quite a long time before it when he couldn't speak and we couldn't really communicate. And at that point, you're kind of you've lost the person already, and so it was a different kind of grieving, I think, to the shock and the suddenness of that death can sometimes bring. And mercifully, I've never had to deal with death in that way.
I can say that I didn't really know any of my grandparents. I knew my granddad, who died quite a few years back when I was maybe 6. That affected me not quite a lot because I didn't know him that well, but it was a sad time for my mum. It was a sad time for me seeing my mum upset, and obviously it upset me as well because I knew him and it's quite upsetting to know that someone you used to know is not there anymore and they're gone.
Probably the same as everybody else. I feel terrible, sad. But I do think that dying young and dying old are two massively different things. I think they should almost have different names, because if you die young, then that's a life lost, a life wasted. But if you die old, there's a rightness to it. Old people should die. That's what happens.
Certainly you cry. I mean, when you go to funerals and things, it's a really sad time, and I've cried a lot over death. That's probably the thing I've cried the most over in my life, and I'm only 23. But then you do remember the happy times, and going forward, you learn to tell people that you love them. So when I'm on the phone to my mum, etc., I always, at the end of every conversation, love you. And going forward, I do, as cheesy as it sounds, live each day as if it was going to be my last, 100%.
I was in year 1 and my dad's sister died. But I was in year 1, so I didn't really understand, so I started crying. But now, I still think about it. Sometimes when I think about it, I start crying. But I don't think about it often.
Well, it just so very much depends on how entwined they are in your life. You can feel sorry, and you can feel sorry at a distant friend died just over a week ago. And I think the feelings were more about their family and knowing what they are going through and feeling worried and concerned for them and hoping that they'll be able to get through this time, rather than actually, honestly, my feeling any real sorrow or grief, because I didn't know the person at all well. Well, I knew them vaguely. But when it's someone close to you, who's part of your life and the fabric of your life and your memories, that's a really hard thing to let go of.
Well, one thing that has occurred to me as I've been talking is that at the beginning I said I don't think about death very much, and now I've realised I think about it really a lot. I do. Sometimes I feel like I don't think about anything else. Not so much death. Sometimes I feel as though I don't think about anything else but aging and time. And I don't know if that's the age that I am, or I don't know, it probably is that. But I do fantasize about living in a culture that didn't have clocks and birthdays and diaries and all those ideas about time, because sometimes I feel entrapped within our ideas of time and enslaved by passing time.
I go past the Grenfell Tower every day for work, and that's awful. That's just to sit and watch that building and think that people died in there. I hear people sort of say about, it's people's time. I mean, my dad was meant to be, for example, in the Twin Towers that day. He was on a business trip. He was booked because he used to travel to India and New York for business. And he was meant to be in that building that time, that day. But the trip got cancelled 2 weeks before. And several people kind of said to me, oh, well, it just obviously wasn't his time. And I'm like, no, that was no one in that building's time. No one in that building deserved to die that day. So it is, and it does hit you harder when it's younger people. When old, like I said earlier about my grandparents, you expect a 70, 80, 90, 100-year-old to die at some point. But when it is someone younger, it is more shocking, and it's certainly more prevalent.
One thing for me is that death is in the natural order of things. And it's quite right that it should happen. It's part of life, and death is part of life. What I do find really difficult is when the order is disrupted. So, for example, if a young person dies, that seems to be not right in the order of things, and that I really struggle with.
Just that I feel like people should be able to talk about death comfortably, and it shouldn't be a topic that is hidden away or not talked about.
Although it's such a scary thing, I don't think people should be afraid to talk about it, because people can help each other. There's so many ways in which people can kind of deal with people passing away that they may not even be aware of.